What's up, it's Bladen, and welcome to my new tutorial series for the Titanfall 2 90% speedrun. In all of the game's history, we've never had a well-produced tutorial for the entire run. We've mostly managed with live commentary walkthroughs up until now, so I'm happy to finally start filling this hole. We've had a comprehensive movement tutorial for quite a while now, but no equal counterpart for all the route to the speedrun. So this should pair up nicely with it, and I'm excited to start rolling out the videos for the next little while. This is really just an introduction video for the series, so if you're ready to jump straight into it, there'll be a playlist link at the top of the description, as well as an end card. The rest of this video will just be me explaining the format and giving some general tips going in. So this series is going to be broken up into 15 videos, one for each level. I've done this to make it more digestible and also make it easier to update parts in the future. Ideally, I'll update the videos with new strats and more variations from time to time, but this project is already eating up a massive amount of my time, so I don't feel like I can make any promises there, but we'll see what happens. Speaking of staying updated though, another good resource for learning the speedrun is the TF2SR Wiki, which is a community-made guide detailing a wide variety of strats in the run. At the time of writing this, it's not quite finished yet, but it might be worth taking a look at. As mentioned earlier, another good resource and also precursor to this tutorial series is Brian Otto and Zweek's Ultimate Movement Guide. I wouldn't recommend trying to consume all of it as a beginner. That would be pretty overwhelming. Instead, I would learn slide hopping, air strafing, and basic wall tech, then just use it as a reference for whenever new techniques pop up in this tutorial. And of course, both of these resources will be linked in the description. This tutorial series is going to be geared toward playing on PC with keyboard and mouse. That's how the vast majority of runners play these days, and also my knowledge of speedrunning on console and controller is fairly limited, though that's not to say this tutorial series will be useless for those types of setups. A lot of the information still transfers, but for controller players there will be differences in routes that rely on lurch. You can technically lurch on controller with a bit of setup, and I'll leave a link if you're interested, but I don't have the experience with it to comment on its practicality or effectiveness. And for console players, you will find less consistency when executing crouch kicks due to the lack of modding, as well as other general inconveniences. If you want something to reference as a controller player, I recommend taking a look at either Darkwing or Zero Man's runs in the leaderboard, as they are the top controller players right now. Obviously, they are way out of a beginner's league, but it's good for getting an idea of controller routing, and is also just a good reference for when you do get to that level of play. One last thing on consoles, there is a console setup tutorial from Doki, so I'll have a link for that as well. Moving on to general setup, this entire tutorial series will be using Mandarin dialogue since it is the fastest language to run on. This will affect the audio cues that are used for some tricks, so I recommend making the swap as soon as possible in order to be on the same page. This can be done fairly quickly by downloading the audio files off of the SRC resources page and swapping them with the ones currently installed. Something you'll also want to install, assuming you're on PC, is our speedrunning client, Ronin. This was originally a fork of the Northstar client and has been progressively tailored towards speedrunning. It offers a myriad of quality of life features, including, but not limited to, converting Mandarin text to English, quick saves, console commands, and crouch kick fix, which is essential when starting to learn crouch kicks. Something I also want to touch on is your frame rate, as it has implications over the whole run. Firstly is wall kick timing. At lower frame rates, it becomes easier to land good kicks, and this should intuitively make sense if you think about it. If there's more time between each frame, then you have a larger window to input jump on the first frame. For example, if you compare 120 FPS to 60 FPS, which is the lowest legal frame rate by the way, every second frame at 120 would be treated as the next frame. This is a small but clear advantage, so if you want better kicks, run at 60 FPS. Second is cutscenes, and really just any downtime or scripted sequences in general. The wait command used in many scripts can randomly take slightly longer amounts of time to execute, depending on your frame rate. This is fixed by using a frame rate that is divisible by 10 minus 1, so 69, 79, 89, and so on. Considering the previous point about wall kicks, 69 FPS could be the optimal frame rate, which is pretty funny. However, it has been shown that using the frame rate divisible by 20 minus 1 improves your jump kit startup time in the fold weapon intro. So there are instances where other frame rates are better. This is a relatively unexplored topic still, so there's a good chance other oddities will be discovered. Generally, what you need to know is 60 FPS is good for wall kicks, and any frame rate divisible by 20 minus 1 fixes random delays in the game scripts. So if you want a flat frame rate to run on, 79 would be pretty solid. What some people do though is set up binds to switch between different frame rates. So they might have one bind to switch to 60 for gameplay segments, then have another to switch to 119 for non-gameplay segments. Some people also just prefer higher frame rates for certain tricks, such as bump launching, so that's also an argument. That's all I have to say for frame rate dependencies though. Now delving deeper into the format of the actual videos, they'll be broken up into 3 difficulties / skill levels: beginner, intermediate, and expert. They will show an easy base route that anyone can learn, then progressively add on not exactly harder strats, but strats that are appropriate to integrate at that skill level. And to clarify, they won't re-show the entire level for each difficulty, since I don't want to bloat the video too much. On that same point, there are also a lot of variations for most strats, so I won't have time to cover all of them. I'll mostly be covering a combination of both the strats I use and strats that are popular among other runners. Now for the specifics of each difficulty, for the beginner difficulty, the goal is to get any new runner from point A to point B as easily as possible in a reasonable amount of time. Thus, it aims to not require anything very mechanically challenging. However, it's still important to obtain an understanding of the fundamental movement techniques so that you can build upon that foundation later. You'll need to utilize slide hopping and air strafing in the routes, and will also be encouraged but not required to experiment with wall kicks. The demonstrations in the videos will usually show routes being done with wall kicks to show it's possible, but they can almost always be subbed out for wall running and wall jumps. It will also never be necessary to do any risky damage boost, meaning anything that can easily result in a death will get an honorable mention at best. Something you can consider if you want to get a head start is you can start messing with some basic lurchless tech, such as lurchless double jumps and wall jumps. It's a little bit unintuitive, so getting a grasp on it early can prove pretty useful later on. However, they won't be required for anything at this level. For most people, Titanfall 2 is a long speedrun to learn, and it can be pretty discouraging with the length of the tutorials reflect that, so I'm aiming to keep beginner segments short, but still as informative as they need to be. Moving on to the intermediate difficulty, this skill level will attempt to layer on more technical mechanics on top of what you already know. Wall kicks are going to be upgraded to crouch kicks, and we're going to be paying closer attention to strafe lurch, how to avoid its downsides, but also how to harness its effects and use it to our advantage. This will come in the form of lurchless tech and tap strafing respectively. Additionally, this difficulty will see the appearance of some more niche movement options when applicable. All these new tools will allow you to build up more speed and also maintain it on more occasions. The routes and tricks covered will start to take advantage of these options, but still won't get too wild. This difficulty will also introduce the more influential damage boost of the run, because the sooner you learn them, the better. With the increasing difficulty though, something to keep in mind is that you don't need to learn every strat at once from a single difficulty. You'll find that the amount of proficiency you actually need will vary from strat to strat, so it will probably be beneficial to resort to easier strats when necessary. Moving on to the expert difficulty, there's not really going to be much new tech introduced. At this point, you should have an excellent grasp of the movement and be able to quickly build and maintain high speeds with ease. Though with higher speeds comes less maneuverability, so I'll be promoting the use of more match-style tap strafing, mainly spam strafing. This will come in handy for making sharp turns at high speeds. And due to the higher proficiency of pilot movement at this skill level, we're going to see it favored over Titan movement when possible. Similar to the intermediate difficulty, we're again going to see variance in difficulty between strats, but even more so this time around. While the expert difficulty is intended to be a step up from intermediate, it's also necessary to cover everything beyond that up to the top level for this to be a complete guide. So I'll be going over those super hard strats when they pop up, in addition to the generally hard stuff. However, most of the underlying routes between all the big tricks and movement sequences will stay the same. So it's not like it will be two whole skill levels packed into one, but rather some segments will just have a larger pool of strats. But that's all for difficulty levels. To finish off, I just want to give some final tips for runners first getting into this. The first being, don't worry about having bad movement. Rather, focus on the objectives of the routes and let the movement come with time. Source engine movement is not intuitive, so it's normal for beginners to make mistakes everywhere, especially with lurch also at play. Another big thing is don't reset on your first run, and this applies to any speedrun. It's going to be much easier to improve off of a bad PB than do really well in your first run. Remember that your first run is the run where you literally have the least amount of experience going into it, so keep your expectations low. On a related note, this means you'll also want to pay close attention to anywhere it's possible to soft lock and do your best to avoid it. And the last tip I have for you is have fun with this. I know it sounds corny, but it's probably the most important piece of advice. At the end of the day, this is just a hobby, and you should engage with it in whatever way you find enjoyable. Not only will you have a better time, but it will make tilting and burnout much less likely. But yeah, that's all I have for you in this video. I wish you the best of luck on your speedrunning journey, and thanks for watching.